when you see a transformation in the industry like that, you have to seize the moment. You lose that, what's going to happen to the auto sector? So my question to anyone is, what's the cost of inaction?
$13 billion. That's the price tag to get Volkswagen to Ontario and for competing with U.S. President Joe Biden's big business subsidies. The government insists they're going to get a return on that investment, but is this the new price of doing business? Let's bring back our front bench panel. Former Premiers Alison Redford, Darrell Dexter, and Stephen McNeil are here. Alison, I'll start with you. I think for a while now, since we knew that the government did put up some money and they did have to counter the IRA, we've been wondering what that would equate to. If you look at it over time, it's about $1 billion a year, in addition to the money they're going to invest to get the plant built. If this is the new cost of doing business here, what does that tell you?
That it's pretty expensive, and it's fairly targeted to certain regions of the country. You know, I mean, I come from Alberta, where we know that the oil and gas industry has been very important in terms of Canada's GDP. I think that certainly there are always climate policy challenges with respect to transition. I think that one of the reasons the government feels that they can get away with this kind of a massive subsidy is that they'll make the argument that these are electric vehicles or electric battery vehicles. They're part of the energy transition strategy. That's all fine, but we also know that those batteries are not sustainable on their own, that there's environmental impact with respect to the heavy metals that are going into them, the minerals, the lithium. And I think that sometimes industry subsidies like this get greenwashed in order to allow the government to argue that they're politically palatable. And ever since the time that I was premier, it was very clear, whether it was Liberal governments or Conservative governments, that the target or the focus was always on the auto industry in Southern Ontario. And so it's expensive. Am I surprised to see it? No, it's disappointing. And I think that a wider ranging set of activities could be much more helpful in terms of what a new economic model looks like. And I'm disappointed to see that number. I think it's great that we're part of the international, you know, economic community dealing with these things, but for a country our size, it's a lot of money.
It's interesting because I think, Darrell, that the government has been fairly upfront about how narrowly focused they will be when they do this stuff, right? They signaled that when they said they're going to have to counter the IRA, and they said basically we're going to, you know, we have to mirror the kind of change in industrial policy that Joe Biden is pursuing there, which is, as Alison points out, very focused on a greening of the economy, what they believe to be the future economic drivers of the economy. Your thoughts on the scale of what they've determined that requires?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think there's anything new about this. I mean, this has happened before internationally, but it also happens within Canada, where individual provinces with stronger economies are better able to put in place economic development packages than smaller provinces with smaller economies. You see that happen all the time internally. I do think that the government has a responsibility to protect the economy from external sources, and in that regard, you can only do what you can do. But we can't allow the U.S. to steal the future prosperity of the country. I don't know how the calculations were done, but usually what they will do when they're forecasting these economic models is that they will look at all the different kind of economic benefits that come from having those jobs in place, having that industry in place, having that sector be healthy. And I can say, this is an experience that we had in Nova Scotia. I can say those things far outweigh whatever the investment is that you put in them, often by a multiple of 10. So this is not, this is not simply throwing money away. It is, in fact, about investing. Governments, I think, I know there are others on this panel who would disagree with me, but I think, government has the responsibility to intervene in the economy when it's necessary, and they should do it. And, whether or not this is a good deal, we don't have as many details as I'd like to have to be able to look at that, but it doesn't upset me.
Well, I think certainly in trying to assess whether or not it's a good deal, Stephen, some of those details are going to be important. And I'll be watching for those tomorrow when the Premier of Ontario is alongside the Prime Minister making this announcement. For example, you know, are there, like in the United States, certain types of jobs tied to the investment, or a certain number, or, you know, what kinds of guarantees? Because I think it's true that this isn't new, that certainly the government makes these kinds of investments, but the scale is, you know, since I've been covering politics, $13 billion is a big number. It's not nothing.
So first of all, Daryl is right. Not everyone's going to agree with the position that government should be writing checks to try to attract the people to come to your country or to your province. Quite frankly, I've seen very few cases where in the long term it provides any stability to the economy. I think when you build an economy that's based on the quality of your workforce, based on, in our case, an announcement you're referring to, the minerals that we have in this country, the skill set that's in Ontario, how do we, you know, that in itself is sustainable and allows you to point forward. Having said all of that, I will give the government and the minister credit. There is a sunset clause that if the Inflationary Act disappears, so does some of the subsidy. Part of this agreement, as my understanding, is based on production. That's rare that you see those kinds of things put in by a government based on when it comes to putting funding out to companies. So I will give them credit in the sense of being able to put some sunset clauses into this. If it truly is that we're trying to compete with the U.S. on the Inflationary Act, then that is a good move on behalf of the government of Canada and I think the taxpayers of Canada.
But I
just have a minute left, Alison. Yeah, last word to you. Go ahead.
I think we throw away around that word sustainability awfully freely. If you look to the resources in Northern Ontario that are on Indigenous land that would need to be used for these sorts of projects, Indigenous communities are not necessarily happy that this is happening. There's going to be a lot of hurdles to get through it, and I don't think we can get away from the fact that there's definitely politics involved here, even the number of constituencies in Western Canada versus Southern Ontario. I think we're now into a new political reality.
I mean, I wouldn't have a show if there wasn't politics.